Hello, it's Sunday morning in the workshop. My last video focused on how to cut mortise and tenon joints using different methods. To follow this up, today I thought I'd show you how to make some mortise and tenon joints when you have a rebate in the frame. Mostly you see this kind of construction in door casings and window frames, or anywhere else where you may need a panel. Over the years I've seen many woodworkers struggle with the concept of long and short shoulders, and they end up with a joint with a huge gap. Oh So in today's video I'm going to show you how to mark out and cut these joints and discuss some of the considerations that need to be made. So stick with me over the next few minutes and we'll make a couple of joints. For this project we're going to use some 2x3. Before we start I'm going to add some face and edge marks to all my components. And then I'm going to divide them into two pairs. Pair 1, pair 2. Unlike last week's video when we made some through mortise and tenon, it's usual when you're making window frames, door casings or anything that have a rebate, is that the rebate falls in this zone here or the zone here. So when you put your tenon joint in there, creating a flat tenon actually ends up with a huge gap. In my experience I've seen people struggling with this, and then when the mortise joint go together you end up with a huge gap, and very typically I've seen them try to glue a block into that gap. So to form this, there's actually two considerations. First of all, bearing in mind that that is your mortise pocket, will you need to rebate up to the first face of your mortise, or actually will your rebate need to be deep enough to go to the outer face of the mortise? Now usually when you make window frames, usually your rebate falls in this zone. When you make door frames where the door is nearly as wide as the casing, then you end up in that zone. Now depending on where you fall in that zone will differ the setting out that you have to do with your tenons. So frame number 1 is a window frame and frame number 2 is a door frame. The first thing we need to do when we set these out is decide on what depth of rebate. Usually for a door frame we need a rebate of about 2 inches or 50 millimeters. Typical door is about 1.75 inches thick, and then there's usually some form of draft exclusion around that door, so the rebate is quite deep. On a window frame, depending on whether you're single glazing or double glazing the frame, then your glass can be anything from 4 millimeters thick right up to a modern double glazed unit which is about 28 millimeters thick. For the sake of this demonstration we'll assume that we're putting a double glazed unit at 28 mil thick. It's about 1.1 inch in thickness, and also we're going to need another sort of 3/8 10 millimeters to get a glazing bead. So in terms of our rebate depth for the window frame, 38 millimeters, which is about 1.5 inches. To start this off, what we're going to do is we're going to add 38 mil or 1.5 inch rebate, and to do that I'm going to do it in my marking gauge. So 1.5 inches at 38 millimeters or 1.5 inches. The next consideration is how deep do you want to make your rebate. If you have got single glass, then actually you could make it around about 3/8 10 millimeters thick. Usually if it's a double glazed unit, because you've got to hide all the butyl gasketing around the edge of the double glazed unit, then you probably need it just over 1/2 inch. When I used to do it, we used to have our machines set permanently for rebating at 9/16, which is around about 13 millimeters. So for the sake of this demonstration I shall use 13 millimeters or just over 1/2 inch. And again, so there we go. So just set the depth of there. So that's the depth of our rebate. So that's as rebate for the window frame. For the door frame, also use an 1/2 inch rebate. So while we've got this marking gauge set, we'll mark them. Now we've got our rebate sorted. Just mark that on there for you guys so you can see them. So now we've got our rebate sorted. We now need to mark out the mortice. So we're only doing one mortice, so what we'll do is from the end we'll strike a line, so that's in the end of our window frame, and then we need to know the width of our timber. So the easiest way to do that is just to mark on the width of our timber, and then this is the face edge, we'll mark that round like so. What we've now got to decide is where we locate our tenon in that piece of wood. Ideally we'd like to go in the middle. Now we can't put it in the middle because of where the rebate will be, so we've got to decide, do we put it at the front or the back? Usually it goes in at the back here using our mortice, and by the way I'm going to cut these by hand because I quite enjoyed doing it last week. So in terms of from that rear of our rebate here, our mortice will actually sit in that location there. So that's our mortice. Turn that over and mark the other side. Okay, so that is our mortice line. So I can now cut that out, which I will do in a while. Right, now here is where people tend to go wrong, because once that is rebated, and this is tenon, and you put these two joints together, you end up having to account for this rebate. So the way we do this is quite simple. First of all, let's piece of wood, mark a line on it, and let's mark the thickness of the wood on it. Make sure that's square. Add, hey, and then add the tenon marks that we've got on, and then add onto that from the face side that mortice there round the edge. So that there is one of our faces of our mortice. When you put these pieces together, you've got a mortice here. So if you cut that line off, which is the thickness of the timber, when you come to put this together, you're going to end up with a huge hole here, which you'll have to fill, and of course you don't want to do that. It's just going to look absolutely horrendous. So what you need to do, this is the bit where people go wrong, is remember you've got to move that ½ inch from your timber thickness. You've got to come back this way ½ inch, which is there, and then squaring that line over and square that line to the face of the tenon. So there we have, just rub that line out now, and what you have is a short shoulder and a long shoulder by ½ inch, and of course that variance between that shoulder and that shoulder will vary depending on how deep your rebate is. I hope I've described that well enough. Long shoulder, short shoulder. You'll see better once I've cut them out. So just to explain a little bit further what I've done here, just to make sure I've absolutely properly explained it, because our mortice pocket is outside the line of the rebate, we can afford to cut the mortice pocket full width of, so we can afford to cut the mortice pocket the full width of the piece of timber that's locating into it. That's the marking out for the window frame. Once I cut that out, hopefully it'll be apparent what I'm trying to describe. I'm hoping I'm describing it in a way that you understand it. So when we now mark the door casing out, there is a slightly different consideration that we need to make. And again, let's go through that marking out. Like the window frame, we're going to have an ½ inch rebate. But unlike the window frame, so we can get our door thickness and our draft excluding product, we're going to make the rebate 2 inch deep. Again, measured from the base of the timber like the window, when we make our tenon, we're going to mark it, the thickness of the timber. And now, once we've done that, got to this stage, we've now got again to decide where we're going to want as tenon. One of us face of the tenon will be at the back of the rebate, so we can't put as tenon in that location because it'd be too thin. So we now move as tenon this way to as near the centre as we can, while still using that rebate line as a guide. Overlay my mortise chisel on there, marking gauge. That now is the other face of our tenon. Now we've got as tenon in place, we now need to allow for that rebate depth. Transfer that line from the face. So that is our long tenon, and this is our short shoulder. So when we mark out the mortise, it's a little bit different from the way we mark out the mortise for the windowsill. That is a mortise based on the full thickness of the jamb of the door frame. But the difference of the two is, when your tenon is within your rebate, as this is, because this is the rebate, when we cut that rebate out by ½ inch, so the rebate is down there, our tenon is going to end up ½ inch narrower than the actual piece, because our mortise is actually going to be that in essence. Tenon is not actually going to be on the face of this timber, it's going to be stepped back that way ½ inch on the face of the rebate. So we need to allow for that. So what we need to do is just mark that ½ inch rebate depth away from that inside line. That's the front face of the mortise hole there. So just before we start cutting out, indicative window section, 1.5" rebate depth by ½ inch. Strike the line on, decide where you want your mortise. In this case it's just this side of the rebate line because it's as near as we can get to halfway. Mark that on there, mark it on there, thickness. Because the mortise is outside the rebate line, then the mortise will be full thickness, so mark the mortise out, full thickness of the piece of timber. And then to compensate for the full thickness piece there and the decreased thickness piece here, once the rebate's come out, you need a long shoulder to sit in the rebate and a short shoulder, so this short shoulder sits on this element. Similar principle for a door frame, but because your rebate is so much deeper, there is no option but for the tenon and mortise line to sit inside the rebate as opposed to sit outside the line. So you still have the short and long shoulder, but because you're going to rebate away some of the tenon, you need to compensate that by cutting a short mortise. So because your tenon is going to be reduced, you need to reduce your mortise pocket by the same amount, so you've not got a really sloppy joint when you put them together. Right, hopefully that's explained it. If you find that it's still not explained correctly, just drop me a comment. Now, so I'm going to cut these out by hand with a tenon saw and the mortise chisel. I'll film it, but I'm going to speed it up to ludicrous speed 7, and then I need to set my router table up, cut the rebate, my mortise, then I'm going to cut my tenon, probably slightly oversized because then it gives me the option of just paring it down to make sure it's a really nice fit. And then once I've got the mortise and tenons cut most of the rebate out just to save my router on the table saw, then take it to the router just to clean it up, and then we'll put it together. So I'll try and do that in quick time so you can see the process but not sat there all day watching me. long shoulder, short shoulder. Long shoulder, short shoulder. There we go, short shoulder, long shoulder, rebate. Typically window frame construction where the tenon is the full width and the rebate is above or outside the line of the tenon. The joint goes together like that. Typical door frame construction, much deeper rebate. The rebate extends through and past the line of the mortise pocket. A long and a short shoulder, but because the mortise is partially cut away by the rebate, we have to reduce the length of the mortise pocket so we get a nice snug fit. So thank you for watching. I hope you found this useful. If so, please give me a thumbs up. And if you've not already subscribed to my channel, then please do so. It does motivate me to make videos. And until next time, bye.